Hello.
first Sketchfab live stream here on YouTube. We've done this kind of thing before on Discord, etc. But since we're growing, we wanted to have a better platform to share our material and help you understand our tools and our community. And so today we want to take you on a tour of our 3D editor, show you all the basic functionalities and show you all the things that are maybe not as obvious to discover. So we're hoping that's going to help you understand our functionality better and improve the quality of your models as well. My name is Bart. I'm head of community here at Sketchfab, and today I'm talking with Rémy. Rémy, you want to say a few
Hello.
words?
Well, I'm Rémy. I'm working as a rendering engineer at Sketchfab since 5 years, and well, I'm here because I know my way around the editor, I guess, and I'm going to show you how it works.
I think you kind of built half of the editor, right, sir?
Not half of it, part of it, but yeah, somehow.
Excellent. Okay, and so the reason that we're doing it this week is that we're currently in the middle of our Nature and Civilization Challenge. It's the biggest challenge we've done to date, and we've teamed up with NVIDIA Studio and Concept D, and we are challenging you to tell a story about the complex relationship that we have with nature and technology. And it can take place in any time, future or past, any place that you like. So the theme is pretty broad, but I think it's very relevant to the time that we live in. And we are seeing some really cool art appear. Right now we are close to 80 entries also. We have about a week left. So you still have time to participate. But if you want to join, you better hurry up because, it has to be good. Prizes include a Concept D laptop. We have 3090 and 3080 video cards to give away, as well as prints of your work, free Sketchfab Pro licenses, and some more things. Everything you can find on our blog. If you go to sketchfab.com and navigate to Explore and then down to blog, you will find all the information that you need about this. To participate in this entry, all you need to do is create a scene, upload it to Sketchfab, and tag it with Nature and Civ Challenge. That's the dedicated tag that we have for this challenge. You can also visit that tag gallery to see all the artwork that you have that has been submitted so far. And you have until November 29th, 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. So it's very specific. We're going to be really watching that clock on entries. Rules apply, and specifically, not all countries will be eligible to enter. So please do read the rules before you enter this challenge. About today's session, so we're going to focus on 3D editor related stuff. Rémy is going to walk us through everything. You can leave your questions on the YouTube chat. We're keeping an eye on that. And in about 30 minutes or so, we're going to pick the best and the most relevant questions out and talk about it. We will not be going into other Sketchfab functionality or about our roadmap, etc. That's for a next live stream, right? So you can, of course, do let us know what you would be interested in for a next live stream, and then we can take those topics and run with that the next time. With that, Rémy, I think it's time for you. I'm going to lurk in the background, and I will cut in if I think that I can add anything.
Okay, thank you, Bart. So let's start. So I'm gonna first make a small tour of the editor for you guys, because I guess not everyone is super familiar with it. So can you start the stream? Good, thank you. So I'm gonna use first this model from Aurélien Martel, which is Destroyed Subway. So to pop up the editor, you need to go to the Edit 3D Settings button here on the model page, okay? It's only accessible on your models, and it will pop this editor, okay? So the editor is split in several tabs like this, where in each tab you can set up a new aspect of the scene. You can navigate around like you do in the viewer. You can zoom in, zoom out. Oh, a bit too much. You can pan or rotate with the mouse, but you have a lot more control of what's going on in the scene in the editor. So the first panel is basically the global settings of the scene. Like you can change orientation of the model when you imported the model and it's not straight up, you can rotate the model like this and so on. So then you choose your rendering pipeline, which is now only available pipeline as PBR, which is physically based rendering, which is basically what you see in most video games, and MATCAP, which is well, something I'm not going too much into now, but it's like well, I can switch it on. It's like you know, clay looking with fake lighting, so that you can see the geometries around. Some models are nice to display like this, but here we are going to keep the PBR setting, and yeah, I'm going to go through directly through the lighting. So what is important in the scene is that you set up the lighting. So by default in Sketchfab, you have an environment lighting. So basically you have an environment map that you can see here that is actually lighting the scene. If I turn it off, there's a lot less light. You can see the reflection disappeared and so on. It's still lighted because it's still lighted because there is baked lights in the scene. So basically, the author of this scene baked the light into the textures, which is a technique that is used in video games, but less and less, but something that helps makes things faster. So the environment, with the environment here in the editor, you can decide to rotate it, to change the lighting, but also to change the background, as you can see. And you can set all the settings differently so that, well, it suits your needs, what you want to do with the scene. One of the most important aspects in the Sketchfab scene is the material panel, because that's here where you are going to be able to set up every single material that is in the scene. So in the scene, you can see there are a lot of them, but I'm not going to go through every of them. You can select them by just clicking on geometries like this. That actually selects all the geometry having the same material, so you can edit the material directly. I'm gonna go through all the tabs, and then I focus on some parts of the material, because I want to show you something very particular about material editing that people often misuse or don't really get in Sketchfab. So for now, I'm gonna go over this and talk about post-processing. So post-processing is actually something that is applied to the final image so that it looks better, does different things. So it can be quite costly in terms of GPU, in terms of rendering time, but it can make the light looks the scene look a lot better. So, for example, here we have different post process that are set. For example, the SSAO is something you want to use usually. It's quite expensive, but it makes the scene look so much better. Basically, SSAO is something that simulates closed shadows in a scene like this. So if you remove it, see, everything is a lot more blend and seems lighted by something that doesn't exist. And if you set it on, there is slight shadow going around every object that makes it kind of grounded on the surface it sits on. So in this scene, the author used grain, which is I don't know if you see it with the stream, but basically you have some kind of noisy pattern on the lights here, and that's actually because the grain is animated. If you remove the animation, well, it doesn't move anymore, but it looks a bit weird. So that grain is actually something that gives you this old TV look that is actually always moving on screen, and gives kind of vintage look to your scene. I'm not super fond of this this effect, to be honest, but well, when it's used wisely, it's super nice. In this scene, it looks actually quite good. Sharpness is important because very often it's a bit misused. Sharpness is going to make your image sharper, and you can crank it up to a value that makes everything look super bad. And yeah, well, when you allow people to do that, they do that. So I really recommend to not use sharpness too high, like 0.2, 0.4 is okay, but don't go higher than that, because it can make the, well, unless you are looking for super artistic feeling that you like, well, don't do this. But it kind of helps when you have blurry scenes. If you remove it, everything gets blurry. So it's useful, but don't overuse it. Vignette. Well, vignette is the go-to post-process if you want something pretty that adds some, dark areas in the corners of the screen, which makes the picture like it was shot with a 8mm camera, and well, it looks quite nice. Bloom in this scene is super important. If I remove it, you don't see the blurry lighting or the highlights on the nose of the train. That's something that makes everything shinier and kind of makes like reflection is actually emitting light around it. Tone mapping is also something you should use all the time in any scene. If I turn it off, the scene is completely dull. Here, the author made a good job of using a filmic time of tone mapping that makes the color more vivid and well, kind of wake up the scene. That's super nice. So after that, you have non-graphic stuff. Basically, you have annotation. I can add an annotation here. For example, type tunnel. This is tunnel. And now in the scene, you have this annotation that is kind of that sticks on in the place you selected it. And if you click on it, yeah, well, you can edit it, but in Sketchfab, it's going to show up as well, an information you give to the user. And if you click on it, the camera is going to go back to what it was when you saved the annotation, like this, because it was the position I saved the camera. But you can also change it. For example, if you want something maybe more close up like this, you can click on this little camera icon, and it's going to save the position of the camera. So next time I click on this icon, the camera is going to go back to where it was. So this is nice when you want to show up different parts of your scene with a camera angle and give some hints to the user what he's looking at. I'm gonna remove it. Then you have animation. I'm going to show it on another model later because this one doesn't have animation, but well, we support animation, and you can, well, not really edit them, but you can choose which one is playing whenever the model is loaded and so on. Then we have the VR, AR setup. So this scene is set up super nicely for VR. So basically, if you put your headset on and start VR, you're going to be like, you are standing like this guy in this tunnel facing the train. And so you can change the scale. So here you see that 1 unit is 1.1 meter. So you can change the scale and, well, depending on your scene, make the well, the experience different. Okay, so what I wanted to show you in particular is actually something people is misused in Sketchfab or don't know how to use. It's opacity. So it's called opacity, but it's also well, called as transparency in some softwares, because, well, that's basically what it does. It makes things transparent. And in this scene, we have something super nice, which is those light shafts, which are actually a geometry that has been crafted by the author with a nice opacity setting, so that it looks like it's ray of lights. So if you look at the opacity setting, if I remove it, it's super, well, you can see the trick. So it's some geometry with a texture that has, well, some kind of shaft on it. But with the opacity setting, it looks, we can look through and it looks super nice. So what are those settings? So here you can see that it's set to additive. So additive mode in opacity is, well, it's a technical term to say that the color of your texture is going to be added to the color of the background. So basically, if here you have a color of, let's say, 0.5 in intensity, and that your area color is 0.6, you are going to have a color of 1.1 whenever you go through. So you can see through, but if you bump it up too much, well, it's completely white, because adding up colors at some point makes white, because you cannot add over the white color. So here it works super nice with additive because the background is super dark. But actually could have used blending mode, which would have worked similarly in this scene. And, well, could be a bit better in terms of rendering in some to some extent. So how is it done? So if you look into it, there is a texture actually, which is raise.png. So I'm going to show you in the inspector the texture. So if I go to opacity here, so it takes some time because it's kind of recompute the whole scene with the new setting. So here you are seeing all the opacity of the scene. It looks like something you don't want to look, but that's the setting. So let's select my model and wait. Somehow it doesn't show up as it should. Let me check something. Okay, so here you can see the lights, the shafts are done with this kind of texture. So it's super simple. It's just like texture with white rays like this, and it's applied to the geometry, and then this geometry is this texture is used as the opacity. So what is white is opaque, what is dark, what is black is transparent in this texture. So that's one aspect of transparency that I wanted to show, because it's a super nice use of transparency here. But you can have some other kinds of transparency, and I'm going to show it to you on another model, which is this model, UFO Enter, from Adrian Kojokaru. So let's edit it. So this model is nice because it has animations. So it has one animation which actually makes like the plane is flying, but what is actually moving is everything around it. So that's a super nice setup, and the model is really, really good. But I'm going to show you how we can work on this smoke trail to make it a bit more convincing. So I'm going to go in my material tab, select the smoke trail material like this, and go in the opacity and turn it on. So if I turn it on with additive mode, as you can see, well, it doesn't look super good. It looks like old kind of transparency that you will see in a cartoon. It's not super great. If I use blending, it's a bit different. You can see through, but not that much, and also you can see parts of the trail that overlap, and it's, well, not super good. What I want to use here is refraction. So refraction is usually used as transparency for glass, for example, because it has this glassy effect, as you can see here. But I'm going to set it up so that it doesn't look like, well, the smoke is glass. So first, I'm going to lower the index of refraction. The index of refraction, if to I, kind of what makes the background image completely distorted inside the smoke. So here, if I reduce it, if I put it to 1, actually, it's completely, you see through, and there's no distortion. So I'm going to put a little bit of distortion like this, so that when it's animated, you see some kind of, yeah, everything is kind of distorted and moving, and it's nice. But it looks a bit too transparent for smoke. So I'm going to add some roughness to it. So roughness is a parameter that's, well, say how rough is the surface, but here it's not really only the surface, it's also the volume. So that makes everything blurrier through the surface. So I'm going to crank it up a little bit more, maybe not too much, like this. It kind of looks better, but still it's a bit too transparent. So I'm going to use a tint and make it a bit darker like this. So this way we have kind of a smoke trail, which is a bit transparent. When you look behind like this, you have a nice effect. You can see the reactor of the plane behind, and still, well, have a smoky effect on this trail. So of course, there are other parts of the scene that are also kind of the same, well, she'll act the same way, like those little clouds that move in and out, of the scene, so that you can think that the plane is moving. So I'm going to do it on them too. So refraction, lower the index of refraction to 1 point something, like this. Increase the roughness, make it grayish, but not as grayish as the other, maybe. Like this. Okay. So that looks a bit better. And now I'm going to show you another aspect of transparency, or of opacity, that is used in this scene, which is also quite nice. You can see some kind of, let me find one. Okay. See those yellowish lines that are here to kind of represent the speed and some kind of airflow in the scene, and they have a particular transparency, which is called dither. So dither works differently. It actually makes like rendering 1 pixel over 2. So you have small holes in the rendering so that you can see through, but it's not actually really transparent. And that's a good way of making things transparent without, well, without using blending. For example, blending here does this kind of effect, which make it a little bit too much obvious in the scene. So using dither makes it a little bit like more subtle. And you can choose between it's a classic pattern, which will be a pattern that is completely, how to say it, super regular pattern. but you can use thin layering, which is going to be something a little bit more random that can look better in some scenes, not typically in this one, but if you put it like this, for example, yeah, it kind of tends to make a little bit noise, but sometimes that's what you want. Thin layering works super well on air, for example. Whenever you have strands of air, you can use this thin layering on the transparent parts of the hair, so that it looks super nice and it's not too expensive in terms of rendering. But most of the time, you want to use the standard transparency dithering pattern. So that's kind of all the aspects of transparency. You can do a lot of things with transparency, and well, I've seen stuff that are not that good, and people misuse it because it's not super intuitive on how to use it. So to wrap it up, you can use, like, if you want effect like this one, which are not, which are lighting effects, which are, it's like you know, a trick to make something look like it's a volume, but it's actually just geometry. You can use blending or additive. It will work. Just try it out. I mean, whenever you are setting up your scene, there is no cost in clicking like a monkey on the on the button and trying to make things look good. Usually it works. Dithering is more for things that you want to be kind of subtle in your scene, like this airflow lines. And refraction is usually up. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay. Refraction is usually used for physically accurate transparency, which is for glass and things like this, windows. Um, you want to use a refraction most of the time. But you can also have super nice effect by playing with the settings and have this kind of smoky effect, um, which looks quite good, in my opinion. So, well, that kind of wraps it up. Maybe, Bart, we can open things to questions now. I don't know, or maybe you want me to talk about something in particular?
Thanks, Rémy. Yeah, we do have a few questions. We got a question from the chat on YouTube, and we have a few collected from like forums and other sources. The first one is from Aligned Games, and he asks, is it good practice to build a scene in Unity or another 3D tool and then export the OBJ files to Sketchfab to avoid building scenes in the 3D editor? So I think the assumption there is that you can actually assemble a scene in the 3D editor.
Well, yes, somehow. For example, in Sketchfab, you cannot move objects, you cannot hide objects, you cannot remove objects from the scene. So there is work to do on any software you use, like Blender, Unity, Unreal Engine. And then when you import your model, some stuff will be picked from your model file, usually position, normals, and so on. But somehow we try to adapt the materials, and we kind of do a good job with this. But you may have to edit the material whatever happens, because depending on the software you're using, sometimes it doesn't completely match with what we are using. For example, OBJ files don't have, they have material, but they don't have animations, for example. So if you want something animated, you need to use another kind of file format. So we support a lot of file formats, and we had to try to map everything to our material system, and sometimes it just doesn't work. So you may have to edit anyway the material when you import a model. Sometimes it's going to work just fine, but well, yes, you have to do it anyway to have a proper model imported into Sketchfab.
But you do need to import everything at once, right? You cannot start by loading your world and then loading another model and another model. That's something
Yeah,
for
you
a
have to do
future
it at
version
once.
of our viewer.
Exactly. However, you can, if ever you are importing a model, starting to change some settings in the editor and then re-importing it because you moved a geometry somewhere or you change orientation of a model, and when you re-import it, we are capable of restoring your settings over, well, the settings with the old models over the new imported model. So you don't lose what you did whenever you re-import a model.
Okay, so you can work in a more iterative way as well. Just try
Exactly.
it out, change
Yeah.
your scene, re-upload, and it should look the same again. Okay.
Yeah, well, in some limits, because of course, if you have edited a model on a geometry and that you delete the edited the material on the geometry and that you deleted the geometry and the material, things won't work super fine. But at least whenever you just change small stuff, it's going to work just fine.
Okay, thank you. Then there's a question from Elvin Gould, and they ask, how can we separate different clips of animation? Do I have to have each animation in a layer? For example, in 3ds Max, cat layer animation system. So this refers to the animation tracks that we can have in our viewer too, right?
Yeah, so well, I'm not super familiar with 3ds Max, but yes, you have to have them separated in several animation. You cannot not have a big animation and then expect to cut in several animation in Sketchfab. The animation editing in Sketchfab is super limited. Wait, I'm not on a good tab. For example, here there is one animation that is called take. I'm not sure,
Just
we
a
are not
second.
streaming.
Jake, can
Okay.
you switch back?
Yeah. Thank you.
Here we go.
So here we have one animation, which is take one. And actually what you can edit is that it plays at different speed, it loops, it repeats once and then stop, or it plays, no, it repeat one. Yeah, no, sorry. I'm doing that again. So repeat one is actually repeating one animation. Repeat all is going to be like if you have 10 animations, it's going to go through all animation and repeat them. And play once is going to play the whatever animation you selected here and play it once and stop. So that's super limited in terms of animation editing. So if you want several animation, you have to split them, but you still have a way to play them in sequence in Sketchfab whenever this happens, so that you can like demonstrate all the animation on the model, for example, that you are selling, for example, or this kind of thing. But yeah, you need separation. I know in Blender, you need to create separate actions for them to export properly to Sketchfab. You cannot put everything in one action. Well, if you do, you will have only one animation in Sketchfab.
Okay, thanks. Next question is from Voxel Artist, and they ask, is there any limitation in the poly count since it's your web browser-based engine? So what are the recommendations in terms of like for desktop or mobile? Or
So poly count is, usually people say, yeah, that's a big poly count is a problem for rendering, but lately it's not that much. I mean, GPUs are made to eat a lot of polygons, and it's not as much as a problem as the number of geometry there is in the scene. And in Sketchfab, we do kind of aggressive optimization of your scene whenever you import it. So what is going to be the real figure that you should look out is the number of material that you have in your scene, because usually we kind of merge the geometry that use the same material. So if you have 10 materials, there is going to be 10 geometries, and that's what counts. The number of polygon, of course, plays a role in the performance. And for example, if you import like crazy models like 15 million polygons models in Sketchfab, it can be slow, especially in mobile. But it can work on some beefy desktop, no problem. Well, being in the web browser makes things more complicated because we don't have access to latest graphic API, and well, there is a little bit overhead compared to a native 3D application, but it's working good and better and better. On well, the biggest challenge is to make it work on mobile phones. But here again, well, you wait 1 year and your mobile phone is actually capable of what 3-year-old's computer was able. So it works. It works. Of course, there are limits, but for plenty use cases, it's super okay.
Maybe to get a good impression of what you can play on your phone, when you visit our staff picks gallery on the website, we always take care to make sure that the models there play on most mobile devices as well. And you'll be surprised to see what your mobile phone can still play. And I think we have some optimizations for mobile phones too, like we're reducing the resolution a little bit for heavier models while you're navigating, and then when you stop navigating, it will re-render in higher quality, etc.
Exactly. Also, we reduced the texture quality because since the screen is super small, you don't need 4K textures all over the place. And usually on phones, also, you know, your bandwidth is super low. So we optimize everything so that the experience for the user is the best. What we do our best to do this, but yeah, there are some limits.
Maybe like related to this, you talked a bit about which options are expensive to use in terms of computing. What, in your opinion, what are the top 3 most expensive things to use or maybe to avoid if you want to have a performance model on Sketchfab?
Well, maybe switch back to the streaming so that I can show in the post-processing feature. Thank you. So here, for example, this scene uses screen space reflection. So this is one of the most expensive post-processing we have because it kind of do some kind of ray marching. Well, I'm not going to go into the details, but it's a post-process that is quite expensive. And actually, it plays a I switch it off. It takes some time. Okay, not sure you can see the difference. Yeah, well, on this scene it doesn't add that much, but actually it kind of make everything reflect, you know, scenes like this. Well, this gun here reflecting in the view. If I remove it, yeah, well, you don't see it much. I'm not sure this model is the best to showcase this, but anyway, screen space reflection is supposed to have dynamic object moving in the scene reflect in reflective surface. And well, this one is adding a lot on scenes, but it's also the most expensive we have. So on mobile phone, if you're aiming for absolutely smooth experience and you value performance more than visual quality, you should turn it off because that's super expensive. SSAO is also quite the expensive one, but SSAO is actually adding really, well, much more, in my opinion, to the scene than screen space reflection. So you should try to keep SSAO on unless you are very, very short on performance. One that can be removed is bloom because that's super expensive. And sometimes I've seen bloom overused in many scenes, like cranked up to the max, and you cannot see anything like this. And sometimes it doesn't add much, but it's still demanding some resources to the GPU. So you should, whatever post process you use, you should always turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, and turn it on, and see if it really adds up to your scene. If it doesn't do much, turn it off because it always costs something. The one that are super not expensive and that you should always use is tone mapping, vignette. Well, you're not forced to use it, but vignette is not expensive. Color balance is not expensive. That's the kind of post-process that are almost free. But I really insist on tone mapping. You should always, always, always use it. And move the sliders so that the image look better. You don't have to know exactly what you do. Sometimes just do like, that's the feeling, you know, you need to, well, that's a pretty image, so I'm going to keep this set. That's it. Another question, maybe?
Sorry, I had to step out for just a second because one of my kids was making some noise. Rémy, technical notes. I think the lag between the audio and the video is getting bigger, so showing things on screen is going to be a bit more complicated. So let's just talk about stuff.
Okay.
A follow-up question from Alvin Gould about the animation tracks. They say, how about separating clips of animation in Unity and then introducing them into Sketchfab? I'm not familiar enough with that. Are you?
Not that much. We have people that know the answer to this question in Sketchfab, but I'm not part of them. Well, I guess separating the tracks in Unity will make separate tracks, but maybe we can follow up on this question and ask the real person that knows the answer. And
also,
offline.
A good source of information for this is either on our help center, which is help.sketchfab.com, or on our Discord. If you head to sketchfab.com/discord, you can join our community chats, and there are channels about general 3D where there are lots of game artists as well who could help you with this kind of stuff. All right. I have one last question here from Konrad Slawinski, and they ask, emissive is always on by default. Do we have to always turn it off for all materials that are not emissive? Does black emissive affect performance, or does it somehow affect the bloom effects? So is this an expensive thing that is on by default and that you should disable, or can you just leave it on?
So the first, emissive is not expensive, really not, because we do basic emissive, which is like using the color to kind of color the surface, but it's actually not emitting light, so it's not expensive. Black emissive is gonna make the object completely well, like there was no emissive at all. So yeah, it's on by default. I know. I'm not sure why, to be completely honest. It's not something that you want to use all the time. It's not a performance killer. It helps with bloom for sure, because whenever something is emissive, it's gonna pop up when you use bloom, like it's glowing. And that's one of the main reasons you want to use emissive, actually, but because you are using bloom in your scene. So yes, it's on by default. You don't have to turn it off, but you can, unless you want to use emissive, of course.
Yeah. All right, great, thanks. And I have a final question. I do have a few more, but those all involve specific models. And since the video is a bit problematic right now, I don't think we should do that right now. The last question I have is, which setting should I always use when setting up a scene? Like, what is Rémy's secret sauce to making a beautiful scene on Sketchfab?
Well, I said it several times, but tone mapping. Tone mapping is the get-go post-process. This is the one that should be enabled by default, because it's almost free in terms of computation. It makes everything looks a lot better. That's yeah, and I don't know. Well, there are so many kind of types of models in Sketchfab. There are different types. This one is a bit cartoon, but you know, it's still using PBR. Well, it's amazing how artists are capable of doing nice stuff. The important thing, I guess, is that when you step back and look at your scene, it looks pretty, well, to you. usually when it looks pretty to you, it's gonna look pretty for other people. So don't overthink it. Just do stuff.
Yeah, my personal favorite is the SSAO, and I know that's a bit more expensive, but it does really help bring out a lot of detail in models if you use it right. And of course, the performant way of doing that is baking it in your software and then exporting that as a texture, right? But
to be honest, if SSAO was not that expensive, we would enable it by default and even not allow user to remove it. But it's expensive, and so that's why it's something you can switch on and off. But technically, as soon as you have lighting, you should have SSAO. But SSAO is a trick. If you look at it in terms of lighting, those shadows should be here anyway all the time. So whatever technique we are using behind the scene to make it look like it's shadows, users shouldn't have to choose. But yeah, performance.
well, that's a valid enough reason. I just saw another question pop in from Aligned Games, and they ask, would you recommend using specular or non-specular setups for these PBR workflows? Does Sketchfab use that well? Personally, I like using non-specular workflow, but I don't want to limit myself. So what is the best way?
Well, to be honest, in the industry, metallic workflow, which is non-specular workflow, is the most used. We support specular because some artists prefer this workflow, and at the beginning of PBR, there was still kind of a choice. Specular was supposed to be more accurate, and metallic workflow was supposed to be more easy to work out for artists. My personal preference is metalness workflow, but and that's the most used. And to be honest, we'd be glad to drop the specular workflow in Sketchfab, but some artists are still using it. So maybe you need to find an artist that you really like this workflow and ask him. But well, that's another way to make to make it to make materials. We are going to continue to support it. I guess, but well, if you have to do a choice, you better use the metallic workflow, in my opinion, because that's the most used. And even if you are a freelancer artist, that's the kind of stuff you are well, you have to provide whenever you have a job. And so I really recommend this one.
Okay, fair enough. So but that's more because it's the best practice than that it gives you some advantage or disadvantage on Sketchfab because of performance reasons, right?
Yeah, there's no performance difference between the workflow. It's more like how the artist understands what he's doing in terms of metallic is super nice because you put metallic to 0 is something plastic or not metallic at all. You put it to 1, that's something metallic. So you don't have to think about it. Specular workflow is that you have to pick the color of the reflection, well, of the material, so that, for example, for something metallic, you are going to need a bright color, but not too much because, well, it's a bit complicated to think about it. I like the metallic workflow because you have base color, which is the color of the object. Then you have, is it metallic or is it not metallic? That's super simple to grasp.
That makes sense. Thanks. I think with that we went through all our questions. So I'm just to take a real quick look in the YouTube chat. Yeah, great answer. Align Game says so. Thanks, Rémy, for taking the time to answer that. All right. Well, in that case, I'm going to wrap it up. For everyone who was here, thanks for joining us today. Do keep your suggestions going because we do want to do live streams more often. And the better we understand what you're interested in, the better job we can do at these. Rémy, thanks for your thorough walkthrough. It's always really nice to have an engineer explain why things work better or like how the transparency modes work, something that has still baffled me after all these years here. As I said before, you can find more information about anything on Sketchfab on help.sketchfab.com. There's an entire section dedicated to the 3D editor, and I do recommend you take a look at these because this is important. We also recently updated our 3D editor, so each tab and every section now contains a little link to the relevant section on the Help Center as well. So just hover over the little question mark icon, and the link will show up that will take you to the appropriate page there. I think that's it for me. Any last words from you, Rémy?
Well, thank you. I hope the streaming was not that bad. I don't have a super internet connection, but I hope it was good for you guys and that you learned some things. Happy to do it
Great.
again.
Okay. Excellent. Well, everyone, thanks so much, and we see you again soon. Take care. Bye.
See you.